Australia's GDP has fallen. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.heise here and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. I have my stein of coffee. I thought we'd have a look at this breaking news from the Bureau of Statistics regarding the latest GDP figures. Unsurprisingly, the economy has contracted. Is this the first step to officially being in recession? Remember, we need 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. We'll have to wait and see. Do you remember the last time we actually had negative growth, guys? Because I really can't remember it. Maybe it's just because I'm getting old. So let's have a look. Let's go through this here. Australia's gross domestic product fell 0.3% in seasonally adjusted chain volume terms in the March quarter to 2020. And growth slowed to 1.4% throughout the year, according to figures released by the ABS today. Now, if we jump over here to trading economics, one thing that I find is very useful about their website is they have a calendar of all of the key dates and economic data that's getting published. You can see here, we'll have a look here. I can't really zoom this chart out anymore. Yeah, we'll go 25 years. So there we go, negative 0.3. So the last time we had negative was in just after 2010. So say at 13, 14. Before that we had at the GFC and right back to 2000. And it doesn't go back to the recession Australia had to have because we didn't have 2 quarters, guys. We had all these dips down. So it's been a long time, nearly a decade. Nearly a decade, everyone. But one thing that's very important, very useful here is the 2 figures here. This is quarter 1. And the actual data, which has just come out, was 0.3%. Last data was 0.5. But here you have 2 other figures called the consensus and the trading economics forecast. So TE forecasted at negative 0.5, while the consensus was 0.3. So it's right on the consensus, better than TE forecast. So maybe that could be why the dollar is doing so well, or there's some positivity surrounding the Australian economy. Sure, we fell, but not as bad as some people anticipated. Chief economist for the ABS, Bruce Hockman, said, "This was the slowest through the year growth since September 2009. Okay, wow. When Australia was in the midst of the GFC and captures just the beginning of the expected economic impacts of the pandemic." So this is just the beginning of the pandemic, everyone. The Australian economy was impacted by a number of significant events this quarter, starting with bushfires and other natural disasters, followed by the outbreak of the pandemic and the subsequent imposition of restrictions. The government responded with the introduction of economic stimulus and support packages. The ABS has published a series of spotlight articles highlighting some of the areas in the economy where the events had more significant impacts. Public demand contributed 0.3 percentage points to GDP, driven by a 1.8% rise in government final consumption expenditure. Government spending at all levels increased in response to the bushfire and management of the pandemic. Private demand detracted 0.8 percentage points from GDP, driven primarily by a 1.1% fall in household final consumption expenditure. Spending on services fell significantly, particularly where restrictions impacted most severely, such as air transport services, hotels, cafes and restaurants, recreation and culture. Spending on goods rose, most notably in food and pharmaceuticals, as households prepared for the introduction of restrictions. We all became ill-prepared preppers, didn't we? We all became ill-prepared preppers. Net trade contributed 0.5 percentage points to GDP. Imports of goods fell 3.9%, with falls in consumption and capital goods reflecting weak domestic demand. Imports of services fell 13.6%, with travel services falling sharply in response to the global outbreak of the pandemic and associated travel bans. Exports of services declined 12.8%, with restrictions on overseas arrivals reducing education-related travel and tourism in Australia. I still remember one of the international students I studied with from Japan who thought he could drive around all of Australia in 2 weeks. You probably could. It wouldn't be much of a holiday and it would be exhausting. Maybe the truckies could let us know their secrets. The household saving to income ratio rose 5.5%, reflecting a rise in gross disposable income and falls in consumption. Gross disposable income was driven by a 6.2% increase in social assistance benefits due to both an increase in the number of recipients and the introduction of new government support packages in response to the pandemic and bushfires. So let's have a look at some more of the charts that they have here. So here we go. This is the key figures. So the Australian economy contracted by 0.3%, and I'll just adjust this so we can see it here on the screen, guys. We can see this on the screen. There we go. Contracted by 0.3% in seasonally adjusted chain volume terms in the March quarter 2020. Throughout the year, GDP was up 1.4%. Terms of trade rose 2.9. Household savings ratio increased to 5.5 from 3.5. So we can see here productivity, GDP per hours worked. That'll be interesting. It's gone down since 2018. Where is it? Quarter on quarter. December 2020. We've gone up. Real unit labor costs have gone down. GDP is down. GDP per capita is down 0.7. That's even more drastic, guys. If we look at the GDP per capita, the growth, since the GFC, we've actually been growing below trend. So we've been growing, but we've been growing below the average since the data. And I've done a video on that a while ago. But you can see here, per capita, we're getting worse off. Population estimates are published in the Australian Demographic Statistics and ABS projections. So here's the GDP growth rate, seasonally adjusted. You can see here, quarterly down. And that's brought the year down drastically. So, we haven't been growing that well for a long time. For a long time, everyone. So let's have a look. Contribution to GDP growth, seasonally adjusted. So general government consumption is up. Household consumption is way down. Private capital formation is down. Public capital formation, well, it hasn't moved. Changes in inventory is down. Exports are down. Imports are up. And GDP overall is down. So, revisions in this issue. There are revisions in this issue due to incorporate of more up-to-date and, they'll get more data later. What we'll do is we will jump here and we'll have a look at this one at the analysis. Some of the things here they'll show us. So, GDP fell 0.3 throughout the year 1.5, the lowest result since the GFC, well below the long-term average of 3.4%. So our average GDP is 3.4 and now we're sitting at 1.4. Does that fill anyone with confidence? And remember, this is just up until March. This data is just until March. So April, May, June, that we're in right now, we'll have to see how this quarter comes about. We'll have to see. What do you think, guys? Do you think it's going to be a strong quarter or a tough one? Will this be the first recession Australia's had in memory for a lot of people? What is that going to do to consumer confidence, guys? What is that going to do to business confidence? Private demand drives the fall in domestic final demand. Domestic final demand detracted 0.5% from GDP, with household final consumption, expenditure, and private investment contributing to the fall. We can see here private demand is down, public demand has pushed up. The weakest household spending result since the GFC. Household final consumption expenditure fell 1.1%. The first decline since December 2008. Since December 2008, everyone. Detracting 0.6 percentage points from GDP. Through the year, the result was 0.2%, negative 0.2%, the weakest since March 2009. Wow. And it's an unprecedented decline in household spending on services. Whoa, look at that. Services consumption dove 2.4%. Dwelling investment continues to decline. There we go. So this is why they are throwing everything they can at housing, grants, left, right, and centre, kitchen sink, laundry tub, bathtub at the back, opening up the old shed, getting out the drums there, chucking it all at it. Non-mining drives the fall in private investment, and we can have a look at this here. Look at that, guys. Damn. Net exports contributed 0.5 percentage points to GDP, and the pandemic impacts the gross value added, We can see here throughout the year retail trade, wholesale trade, accommodation and food, transport and arts and other services. Look at that. Healthcare services recorded a fall. Healthcare and social assistance value added had fallen for the first time since 2011, down 0.1% in the March quarter. This was driven by a postponement of elective surgeries and a reduction in face-to-face visits to medical practitioners in the wake of the pandemic. So let's jump here. We'll have a look at this data here and hours worked. Hours worked, because I think this is interesting. The shutdown of non-essential services and trading restrictions due to the pandemic that occurred late in March. Remember, just late in March. So there's so much we're not picking up in this data, everyone. The economic shock affected the demand for goods and services of many businesses, resulting in change to business practices and consequently a reduction in hours worked. Hours worked is the key measure of labor input into the economy. A fall in average hours worked in a quarter may lead to lower production and therefore GDP. The hours worked data presented in the national accounts is collected by the ABS Monthly Labour Forces Survey. We'll just scroll down here and we can see quarterly hours worked. Hours worked fell 0.8% in the March quarter, with significant impacts on key national accounts aggregates, including GDP per hours worked and unit labour costs. So we can see here, hours worked down, unit labour costs down. And then household consumption. Household consumption decreased 1.1% in the March quarter and 0.2% throughout the year. The falls were last observed during the GFC. I mean, look at that there. What does that tell you about people? Are they worried? I guarantee you a lot of the viewers of this channel, a lot of viewers are preparing, putting money aside. Confidence is down. What would it take for your confidence to rise up? The decrease in household spending was driven by a 2.4% fall in services consumption for the March quarter, partly offset by an increase in goods consumption of 1%. So, because we all became preppers and everyone stocked up, that offset the fall. It would have been even worse. Now, if restrictions get eased, opened up, and people can get out there, hopefully that might make a dent on this quarter's figures, because people get out, all going stir crazy. But we'll have to see. So there's services, there's goods. Look at that crash. Changes in household spending behavior. And this is something I've discussed in other videos where we're seeing, behaviors are going to change, and that may leave a lasting impact on the retail sector. Do you think it'll leave an impact on a generation? I think it will. There were impacts on household consumption expenditure from both the bushfires and the pandemic. Early in the March quarter, bushfires and associated smoke haze led to disruptions to domestic travel and reduced retail foot traffic. This was followed by escalating concerns about the spread of the pandemic that led to restrictions on overseas travel, bans on indoor and outdoor gatherings and domestic travel, increased work and leisure from home, and limits on business trading. There were significant impacts on household spending on services due to the pandemic and social distancing measures. Travel disruptions reduced foot traffic. Bushfire drove a large fall in hotels, cafes, and restaurants, and the falls across both catering services and accommodation services categories. Remember, guys, because this is the March quarter, there's still the bushfire data here. We haven't seen much of the pandemic data represented here, much of the economic lockdown. We'd have to hit a recession next quarter. We'd have to. There'd be no way the restrictions could offset the damage that's been done. What do you think? Reduced demand for travel and stay-at-home measures led to a decrease in transport services. Social distancing measures and deferral of elective medical procedures resulted in a reduced demand for health services. Restrictions on indoor and outdoor gatherings had a major impact on recreational cultural services. So we can see, there you go, look at that, guys. 15% down on transport services. How are all those people who've invested in the large infrastructure businesses that have all the toll roads, how are they going to go? I'm assuming that would jump back, because people want to get out there and about. You'd probably be less inclined to care about your toll if you've been cooped up for so long. Household consumption of goods. There we go. They've shot up. Medicines up. Goods for recreation and culture up. Food and household items up. So there we have it, guys. Our first hit to GDP in a long time. And remember, this feels more and more that it's mainly the bushfires we're seeing here and just the beginning of the pandemic. Are you surprised by the data? What do you think next quarter will bring to us? And how are you preparing? Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments and opinions down below. If you're a fan and you'd like to support the content I create here, there are a few ways you can. You can join the channel on YouTube or Patreon. You can support us via our affiliate links at Amazon or eBay or Independent Reserve and Kucoin. You can buy our merch from HeiseSays. send us gold using Gold Pass from the Perth Mint, or support us via PayPal. Take care, guys. I'll see you next time.